This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to begin with an apology. I'm sorry I'm running a little late this afternoon. The day just got away from me. Uh, Anyways, we're here for the regular meeting of the West Basin Engineering Operations Committee, as well as a special meeting of the Board of Directors. And it being a little late, but the start of the meeting, we'll call the meeting to order. And first thing we'll have is determination of a quorum, which I believe we have, but I will confirm that. General Manager, do we have a quorum?
We do, Chairman Alvarez. We do have yourself as chair, the other committee member, President Harold Williams. We also have our committee alternate, Director Scott Houston. And I do believe that we have our other two directors, Director Don Deere, as well as Director Gloria Gray, attending virtually.
Great, thank you. Any public comments this afternoon?
Chairman Alvarez, we have not yet received any requests for public comment, but we do have a couple members of the public, I believe, on virtually, as well as one here in-house. So if anybody would like to make a public comment, please let us know.
Okay, seeing no public comments, we'll move on. Next item is presentation. And do we have any presentations? I don't think so.
We have no presentations today.
No presentations. So we will move on to the action calendar. And the first item is the agreement for awarding a supply and delivery of anti-scaling chemical contract. So, Mr. General Manager, can you introduce that, please?
Yes, Chairman Alvarez. The first item we have is under the action calendar, item number 5A. It begins on packet page 3 of your committee agenda and packet. As you mentioned, it is in relation to an agreement award for supply and delivery of anti-scalant chemicals. And today we have our senior operations engineer, Susanna Lee, here for the presentation.
Thank you, EJ. Can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez.
Good afternoon.
Here, echo. All right, sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and members of the board. As EJ mentioned, this item is for agreement award for supply and delivery of anti-scalant. And you can find a copy of the memo on page 3 of the packet. So the current agreement is set to expire by the end of December this year. And you may be aware that anti-scalant is a specialty chemical which is used as pretreatment in the reverse osmosis treatment process. And this chemical is important and is used to help inhibit scalant from forming on outer membranes. And due to its proprietary nature and its compositions, which varies by manufacturer, the procurement process is a little bit different from the bulk chemicals, where an agreement is only being awarded to the supplier identified as offering the lowest annual cost after completing a demonstration test on West Basin recycled water. So, however, a waiver can be granted to the testing if the supplier is able to demonstrate its product successfully work at West Basin facility in the past 24 months. So staff issued a request for proposal on August 12, 2021 for the supply and delivery of anti-scalant. And the proposals came in and we received on September 7th, and we evaluated based on the total annual cost of the anti-scalant products delivered. We received a total of 2 proposals as summarized in Table A in the memo. Avista Technology is the lowest suppliers with the unit price of $1.02 per pound. West Basin is currently using Avista Vitec 1400 anti-scalant for the last 24 months, and which has been demonstrated to be effective in all of our membrane treatment processes. And based on the current performance, therefore, Avista Vitec 1400 has demonstrated to meet all the anti-scalant specification. So with that, staff recommends the board authorize the interim general manager to enter into agreement with Avista Technology. With that, I read the recommendation that the board authorize the interim general manager to enter into agreement with Avista Technologies, Inc. for the supply and delivery of anti-scalant chemical Phytech 1400 to Edwardsville water recycling facility and satellite plants at unit rates of $0.02 per pound plus sales tax from January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Director Williams, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a question of Barkan.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Barkan, are you satisfied with this report?
I am President Williams. Yes, we've done our due diligence and we've conducted a thorough RFP process, and the results came in to our expectations.
Okay, well, thank you. That's all I need. Thank you.
Okay, other board members, do you have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Gray.
No, I'm just acknowledging. No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any questions per se on this one. I would go ahead and move this forward to the full board. If you concur with that, Director Williams?
I do concur.
And I do have one request when it comes back to the full board. And on the fiscal impact, I note that it does say that it is budgeted within the chemical recycled water operating budget. But I did not see a line item in the budget for this, so I don't know how much money was budgeted specifically for this item. And I would like to see a additional or expanded explanation under the fiscal impact section of the report and specifically budgeting for this item.
We will amend the.
Can I add that in the memo, it did say that we are estimating roughly about $130,000 for the fiscal year. So is that the amount that you want to see in the fiscal impact?
Yeah, and I want to see specifically that it's budgeted, because in the it says in the operating budget it's there, it may be in the overall operating budget. There is no strategy for the operating budget budgeted for all these operations. Okay, with that, then we'll move to the second action item, which is the analytical chemical services contract. And General Manager, if you could introduce that item. And
Happy to do so, Chairman Alvarez. As you mentioned, the next item is 5B, the award of chemistry analytical reporting and courier services contract. For this item today, we have our manager of operations, Ms. Uzi Daniel, here for the presentation. However, I did want to preface this item. As you might recall, back in June, July, we did have several discussions related to the release of the RFP for these services. At the direction of the committee and when working with the chairman, staff made a significant effort to ensure that maximum opportunities for all different laboratory services companies to apply for this RFP. I think that you'll see within the presentation itself, or excuse me, the memo, as well as the presentation, all of the different efforts that staff put forward on this item. And as general manager, I'm very satisfied with the work and want to say thank you to the staff for all the work that they did on this item. In addition to that, as we work through this process, I think under the original calendar, the services of a company in relation to the services that we're seeking, we did anticipate that we would have somebody on board at this time. Looking at this item and looking at the board schedule, we understand that it'll take some time to get potentially a new company on contract in order to provide these services. And it has become aware to staff that under the existing agreement, the recent invoices have exceeded our projections, and therefore we do have some concern that the existing agreement does not have enough funding. And I bring that up because you'll see in this item, we did provide 2 specific options for the committee and board to consider. And I'd like to really focus on the recommendation within this memo, and then of course, raise the issue of concern that we have. And the thought from staff would be that we would bring a potential action, depending on how this goes today, we'd bring a potential action at the FNA and or the board meeting and focus in on what's needed for our existing contract. So we would separate that out and focus on the new contract, and then of course at a nearby meeting or future meeting, we would talk about our existing contract. So with that, I'll hand it off to our Manager of Operations, Uzi Daniel.
Thank you very much, EJ. Good afternoon, directors, members of the public, and my fellow co-workers. Yes, I will be bringing forward today our memo, which you can find on page 25 of your packet. Item 5B, Award of Chemistry Analytical Reporting and Courier Services. By way of background, laboratory services have been needed from day one of operating our plant. They are required for the sampling that is in our permits at all of our facilities. That includes our plant in El Segundo, our facility in Carson, the different nitrification and boiler feed units, in addition to our distribution system, 11 different groundwater monitoring wells, all a part of various permits. What makes us unique, as everyone knows, and something to be proud of, is that we produce multiple types of water. What that means is that while many agencies operate under one permit, West Basin has various product lines which require multiple permits issued by the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board and overseen or recommended by the Division of Drinking Water. These permits mandate routine sampling for all of these facilities to ensure that we are compliant with federal, state, and local permits. Process control samples are also required for us to maintain that compliance. And then oftentimes, many special samples we do put in there to try to anticipate any upsets, any research we want to do, analysis, troubleshooting. Of course, as we'll mention later today also in some of our more detailed presentations on costs from the Hyperion event, we do not anticipate such large events, but all of those are done in the best interest of water quality, protecting our customers, and then often require additional sampling. A request for proposal was issued by West Basin on our online bidding system on August 3rd. We had 2 addendums and extended the deadline twice for it to be due on the 27th of last month. To encourage more participation by labs of all sizes, we searched the state database, or better known as the ELAP database, for all water and wastewater certified laboratories. That's important. We are required to have the ELAP certified labs. We reached out actually to all of them to make sure that they were on our new system and aware of a pending bid or request for proposal that would come out. This was done via emails and even calls and staff outreach. Some of us who participate in committee meetings, such as at AWWA, CWEA, we make sure to take advantage of those opportunities to let people know they should look at our bidding system and sign up if they're interested. Approximately 340 suppliers actually received this RFP notice, and in the end, 3 submitted proposals. Following the solicitation of this, we actually reached back out for feedback from multiple laboratories that did not submit. We wanted to find out what we could do better, if there were specific reasons why people hadn't. And then we did that before our panelists did review any of the bid packages. And we can give more detail, but what's interesting is a lot of labs have developed niche organizations. That is, they've kind of found where they like to focus. Many of us know that have worked in the industry, it's not an elastic function. If you have a drinking water company, a city, they don't go out of business. So a lot of these labs have become kind of dependent on the same customer, and they express to us they don't handle large volumes. They don't want to handle large volumes. Maybe even now there's labor shortages, again, which we'll go into in our next presentation. And then just for point of reference, something that comes up frequently, whether it's a laboratory or not, is just the insurance requirements and the liability coverage. Our indemnity requirements, understandably, are significant and important, but for smaller businesses, sometimes that is a little bit of a heavier burden to carry. Finally, I want to bring up that this is something that we may bring to the board at a different time, that the new ELAP requirements are forecast to force smaller labs to go into more of a niche or even possibly discontinue what they do. And that is because some of the standards are becoming so rigorous, there isn't a lot of interest in labs expanding their business. That is something that we do participate in. We try to stay active in, and we'll notify the board whenever there's an opportunity to perhaps send letters and support that cause. If we refer back to page 26 on here, you can see a summary of the final evaluation scores and rankings on table 1. The cost breakdown is given here by the different labs. Again, it was a request for proposal. We evaluated all different criteria, their references, their abilities, what they may have submitted for, as that was something we allowed to be more flexible, let labs have the ability to only submit on certain different analytes if that's all that their lab could do. West Basin also has been working with other partner agencies or sister brother agencies, such as Orange County Water District, the Water Replenishment District. We reached out to the City of Santa Monica, City of Pasadena. We've been trying in operations in general, whether it's laboratories or other business, to find out how they're doing business. How are they guaranteeing that they can have a supply-demand chain that doesn't get interrupted? And that's what you see here is us. The reason that we decided to go with 2 labs is because that seems to be a very healthy trend to ensure that we have a backup, that we have 2 labs sharing the work that can control the volume that West Basin produces, but then also having backup so we don't get in a vulnerable position where we have a compliance issue in the end or even have to shut down operations. As you'll see then, as we move on to page 27 of your packet, we have split up such that Eurofins, Eaton Analytical, is going to be recommended to perform the chemistry, analytical, courier, and reporting services for our Title 22, our Chevron, all our industrial stormwater, and our biosolids permit. We will have WEC recommend that WEC Laboratories perform chemistry, analytical, courier, and reporting services for the barrier permit, which includes the compliance wells, the 2 brine permits, and the purveyor program, which is a pass-through program, for a period of 3 years. In addition, we did offer on here an alternative, option 2, if the board chose to consider amending the current WEC agreement in the amount of $186,000 for a not to exceed amount of $999,076 with an extension for up to 1 year. Table 2, you will see a breakdown of how we decided to split this. And I'll note on here, development miscellaneous samples, that says 15, that should be 150. That's another example of where we try to anticipate where might we need extra sampling that we don't know about. What if they lower an MCL and suddenly we have to take more samples? if there's an upset, or what if we're just trying to optimize a system and we want to send samples out. Samples can range in price from, you know, $15 all the way up to $2,200. So at some point, the lab staff, we have to make a general estimate here, and that is what affected us on our last contract. No one anticipated the level of sampling we would have to do for the length of time due to the upset at Hyperion. With that, I'd like to emphasize that the benefit of this is because it is required by our permits, our many permits, and that by securing 2 labs, we feel that we are making ourselves less vulnerable. Also, the fiscal impact, this is included in our budgets. I will try to get that number. The director noted in the last item that you would like the specific line item. We will get you that number for what we budget each year. And then we do include that in every year's budget, trying to estimate, literally counting every sample needed for every permit and putting that in the budget. And that is funded by our operating revenues. With that, I will read the recommendation. The recommendation is that the board authorize the interim general manager to enter into the following 2 agreements for chemistry, analytical, courier, and reporting services for a period of 3 years, beginning January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2024. The first with Eurofins Eaton Analytical, LLC of Monrovia, California, in the amount of $114,390 plus a 10% contingency for a total amount not to exceed $125,829. And the second contract in agreement with WEC Laboratories, Inc. of the City of Industry, California, in the amount of $522,195 plus a 10% contingency for a total not to exceed amount of $574,414.50. With that, I would be happy to entertain any questions and answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I want to reiterate something. If you look at the recommendation, that is staff's recommendation after the due diligence work on this item. But I wanted to point out, and Uzi mentioned it as part of our talking points, that on packet page 27, if the committee and board were not to adopt staff's recommendation on this item, it would require us to take specific actions as the current agreement would lapse. And so we would need to take specific action in relation to that. So I wanted to highlight that. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, it has come to our attention in relation to our current existing contract that we will need to, we did not budget for it and we did not place enough money on that current agreement. And there are several reasons why it's likely that we will exceed that. I think the most significant, obviously, is the impacts from the incident at Hyperion Reclamation Plant. So I wanted to highlight that because I know that it's somewhat related, but for the purpose of this discussion in planning and moving forward, I'd like to focus in on the recommendation here in this item. And then, of course, if you have any questions about the existing contract, we're happy to discuss that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, Director Williams, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, I would just ask Barkham if he's satisfied with this and believe that these prices are fair for us. And that would be all I have. The rest of this would I would have to wait and see how the chair feels about this. Thank you.
President Williams, was that a question for me?
Yes.
No. Okay, go ahead, Barker.
Yeah, President Williams, yeah, a significant amount of coordination occurred for this RFP process, and a lot of input was provided. And as Uzi mentioned, we did a lot of homework with contacting other agencies, with contacting vendors as well, getting feedback, and a significant amount of effort was put into by staff to reach the conclusions that we reached. So, to answer your question, yes, we're very satisfied with the recommendation presented here.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, any other board members have any questions or comments on this item?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I do have a couple of comments. I want to thank the staff for and appreciate the efforts to really go out and get additional information to the analytical community to see if we can encourage more proposals on this. And as the general manager alluded to, part of the issue in getting greater participation, especially from smaller companies, which would be well qualified to do some of these services, is some of the requirements that we do have in terms of insurance and liability and so on, that tends to preclude or make it more difficult for smaller companies. And a lot of laboratories tend to be smaller laboratories, and they do specialize, etc. So one of the things, not obviously for now, but for consideration by the board and for staff to start thinking about, is that we ought to look at some of the requirements we have contractually, because it does preclude having smaller companies and minority-owned companies participate in some of these opportunities. And I think it would behoove us to encourage greater and wider participation. So it might be a little bit too late now, but as we move forward, we should look at that. And I think we as a board really need to look at some of the requirements that we have. There is a balancing act that needs to take place between protecting the interests of West Basin and the ratepayers that it serves, but also to make sure that we make opportunities available to the widest number of companies and individuals operating businesses out there that are qualified to provide the services. So qualification should be the primary item, and some of the other legal items that are in there need to be maybe be muted a little bit more. Those are my primary comments, because I do know that there are an awful lot of laboratories, many more than just a couple of dozen, and a lot of which are qualified to do some of the services that we're requesting and which we will be awarding contracts for. And this is a significant amount of work. So it would behoove us to have greater participation than just receiving 3 proposals in the future. So that's my main comment on this. And my second comment is basically very similar to the comment that I had on the earlier item. If this item moves forward to the full board, when it comes to the full board, I'd like also to see an expanded narrative in the fiscal impact section. Because again, if you look at the fiscal impact write-up for this particular item and the last item, they're identical. But they are 2 different line items, they're 2 different amounts, they're 2 different categories that should be considered, etc. And they should have clearly been identified in the budget, so that we know how much we budget for all of these items that we know we're going to be incurring and we have to take into account. With that, Director Williams, are you okay if we move this forward to the full board with the recommendation?
Yes, I am. I concur.
Okay. And then one last thing that I would add, and that is the general manager did mention that the current agreement contract amount has basically gone over the authorized amount, and primarily because of all the additional testing due to the upset at the Hyperion plant. So if you need to address that, you might as well incorporate it in this item when you bring it back to the full board.
And thank you very much, Chairman Alvarez. And we did discuss this internally as the best way to bring this forward, and that's why I really want to make sure that we addressed it up front. We wanted to alert the committee of that. As part of our procurement process and our contracting process, we wanted to make sure that it was very transparent and very separated as far as the new item and the existing. And so we will be addressing this underneath our next update, under the operations update, so you'll get a little bit more clarity as to the issue there. And then, of course, we'll be bringing this forward as a separate item for the committee and board this month, so we can address that concern. But you'll be hearing more about that shortly.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. With that, then we will go ahead and move on to the information calendar.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Alvarez. As mentioned, the next item that we have is item 6A on our information calendar. It is our water facilities operations update. That begins on packet page 47. And as always, we do have a team effort here. And I believe that Ms. Uzi Daniel will be leading us off. Uzi, can you correct me if I'm wrong? I thought you were leading it off.
It actually will begin with Susanna, who will give the updates, and we will. This one is definitely a triple scoop of fun. We will have some input also from Barkev, myself, and then finally Jeremiah. So thank you very much, EJ and Susanna. I think you have control.
Thank you.
What is that packet page number?
The packet page 47.
47. Thank you.
I think EJ, it's
The memo begins at page 47. The presentations begins on page 57.
thank you, Susanna.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, EJ, and good afternoon again, members of the public and members of the board. So if you can follow along on page 57 of the packet, and we'll begin with our updates. As normal, I'm beginning with the review of the plant influent water quality updates, as the graph indicates that the influent water quality has improved since the beginning of the Hyperion upset. And while the average in September has come down from the August average of 45 NTU, September average influent turbidity was at 28 NTU, and still more than double the normal range. And if you would follow along the red line and the green line, that represents our disinfected tertiary filter effluent turbidity. Even though that our number of exceedance have came down compared to August, we still have a number of exceedance during September. So going to slide, the next slide on page 58, this just shows a more true representations of the magnitude of impact due to the events. The takeaway from this slide is that, as you can see, comparing to the earlier days of the event, September turbidity has come down significantly. However, you can see from the graph is that there is still highly variable, the water that coming in, compared to the red line, which represents the 3-year influent turbidity average prior to the event, which is averaging around 13. We're still above normal, and so we're, in terms of operations, we're still having some challenges to get us back for recovery. So with that, I'm moving on to the next slide to talk about some of the ongoing efforts and response efforts. So on page 59, if you would, I'm just going to go over some challenges in terms of water quality. Like I said, it has improved. However, it remains highly unstable. Just this past weekend, they had lost a cryogenic units, which brought instability back to the influent water quality. We saw a little bit higher solids. Turbidity was stable, however, but bottom line is we need stable water quality. Then we can talk about recovery, true recovery effort. From operational challenges, one of the main challenge that we are having right now is the ferric chloride shortage, which we'll talk about later about our supply chain challenges that we're facing currently. Because the water quality is still highly unstable and the water quality is mainly still not back to the prior event normal range, we still rely on more than double of our normal ferric chloride dosage. And in conjunction with the shortage, it really forces to limit our current production at ECL. Hence, we are still relying on potable water at our satellites facilities. So this is a challenge. We are seeing some improvement in terms of increasing loads, but it's still not stable in terms of delivery as of this point. The second challenge that I would like to point out is the removal of the excessive solids that have built up in our system. At the beginning of the events, I think I mentioned last month as well that we were seeing more than 4 times of solids that came in through our system. And as you may be well aware now that our system is integrated and solids get recycled and recycled. So in order to really do a thorough cleanup of our system, we need to remove these excessive solids from the system. So Suez operations been very busy and getting extra contractor and vendors to remove solids from the system, including the pre-treatment clarifier and backwash clarifier and gravity thickener and whatnot. Because in order to get these solids away, we can't just let it recirculate within the system to allow better performance of our filters. The last but not least, and really is a pressing challenge as well, is the assessment of the microfiltration production impact due to this event. During the earlier days of the events, operations really rely mainly on the phase 4 system, and that system really took a heavy beating due to the heavy solids loading. And we have discovered that the clovers that close the membranes have developed cracks. And what that results in is that the system now is not integral, and we really need the system to be integral to produce water that will meet groundwater recharge regulation requirement. And the clovers being procured at this moment, and a PO will be issued soon, which will allow us to bring this system back to integral condition. So as part of the crack clovers, the membranes were not being washed effectively, and we noted that these membranes are heavily fouled, and the permeability and the production from these membranes have significantly reduced. We have tried, operations have tried numerous times to try to clean, and at this point, the membranes have been severely been impacted, and we need to assess how much the production is impacted, and we most likely will need to procure these membranes, replacement membrane, earlier than anticipated. We're assessing different procurement options at this point. These are originally OEM membranes, hence there are not like a dozen or different membranes out there. So we'll bring back this item to the board and let you know about the options in the future. So with that, I will go to the next slide to just show you some of the photos from this past month. The set of photos on the left are just to highlight the solids, the amount of solids that I just talked about at the different location of the disinfection systems. This is on the pre-treatment highway clarifier, and this is the really thick solids that build up on the denser deck, which is backwash highway clarifiers. In the middle shows the efforts that are being taken place to remove these solids. We have vacuum trucks at our highway clarifiers and the denser decks, different places. You have contractors literally using a 2-inch vacuum hose to removing these solids from the top as well from the bottom. On the right hand side, the set of photos are showing the pre-treatment highway clarifier after being cleaned. So finally we can see after a week or so of cleaning, we finally able to see the bottom of the clarifier and with most of the solids being removed. And with this, then, as the board is very interested to know what all these efforts have cost the district. So with that, I'm going to pass to Barcav to give you some preliminary information on that. And so with that, Barcav.
Okay, we
Barcav,
can't.
you're on mute.
I apologize. Good afternoon again, board members. As Susanna mentioned a couple of slides earlier, we are continuously evaluating the impacts of the spill event and the water quality that we're seeing post-spill event on West Basin facilities. Our facilities were not designed to handle this type of water for this long. So what we wanted to do in a few slides here is to give some sort of an indication, some sort of a comparison for the board to understand what kind of cost impact this event has on West Basin. In terms of, we're still receiving invoices. We've received some costs from July and August. The event occurred on July 11th. We're still receiving some of the costs in September. So we're still putting those costs together, we thought that would be good for us to come into the board and give, again, some sort of indication. So what we want to present here on this next couple of slides, one is for July and one is for August, and then we'll talk about the summary of the conclusions. But what you see in front of you is a comparison of $1 per acre foot of cost. One that is based on the average of the last 3 years, and one that's based on this year, accounting for the spill event. So what you see here before you on the blue column is that average, that 3-year average of cost, dollar per acre foot, of the different treatment aspects and distribution aspects of our operations. And the reason why we are looking at this from $1 per acre foot is because if we were just looking at this from a dollar standpoint, we're not going to get a true indication, because we actually asked customers to pull back demand, and we actually delivered less amount of water. So the correct way, if we're doing a true comparison, it's best to do it from $1 per acre foot standpoint. So again, the blue column you see in front of you is $1 per acre foot from some different treatment categories, and these categories are presented to in F&A committees on an annual basis. And then on the red column is the cost from this this year in July. And then at the end, on the far right, you see the difference. So let's go through this. This is the July slide, and you see that treatment plant contract operation and maintenance, just on the labor, we saw a 17% increase in July. And again, the event happened mid-month. Treatment plant contract operations, that includes some lab services that Suez does, some chemical that Suez purchases, and some administration maintenance costs. So you'll see in July, we had a 30% increase on those types of costs. Utilities, that includes power, but it also includes potable water supplies. Well, we shut down barriers, so there is a little bit of power savings there. But the amount of potable water that we use to supplement the system to try to meet compliance was significant. So you can see from the utility standpoint, 40% increase in July, 42%. Some of the chemical purchases that West Basin uses or purchases and provides Suez, 55% increase. Sludge management, so in all those trucks, additional trucks that we had to bring in to take out the solids, as well as the vacuum trucks that we had to bring in to take out the solids, sludge management went up almost double. So you can see the subtotal to plant operating expenses, and as well as the expenses from the distribution system operations went up 31% in July. While the costs per acre foot went up 31%, we actually delivered 28% less to our customers as compared to the average of the last 3 years. The cost went up and we delivered less, so there's money lost on sales as well. So this is the July slide. If we can look at the next slide here, which is the August, is on packet page 62. The August numbers are worse. Contract O&M 66% higher, double on the maintenance and chemicals. Utilities went up. The utilities were about 5 times higher, and that's mainly because of the potable water that we used as a supplement. Chemicals up 80%, and then sludge management 141% more. So you can see that overall our recycled water operations for October went up 118%, more than doubled, but we sent out 40% less than what we normally send to our customers. So let's summarize this in the next slide. You see, we said in August, costs doubled on a dollar per acre foot basis. And we sent 28% and 41% less, respectively, for July and August to our customers. In addition, if we were to kind of compare the sales, the dollar amount sales for those 2 months, July and August, in this table, compared to the last 3 years, you can see that the loss of revenue is estimated for those 2 months at around $3.4 million. The last point I'd like to make here is that supplement potable water that we use for 3 months is estimated at 2,200 acre feet roughly, which is enough to supply approximately 6,600 of Southern California homes for 1 year. So again, this is just a sample indication that we wanted to bring on the board and kind of give a heads up on. We'll continue to develop the costs and put them together and report back to the committee and board in future meetings. I'm going to pass it over to Uzi unless there's questions that we want to address right now on those.
Director Williams, do you have any questions on this portion? How about other board members?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I'm sorry. I was muted.
No, thank you. Director Gray, thank you.
Director Houston, you had your hand up?
Yes, sure. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first I want to say thanks staff for putting this together. I mean, I know we're in the midst of it still, and I'm actually quite blown away by how big a deal it actually ended up being. But I think my only question at this point was, you said, I'm sorry, I'm grabbing on my pages. You said that our production, yeah, the total deliveries, say in August, was down about 41%. Of course, we do 5 different types of water quality. So is one or another impacted more than the others? Just so we have an understanding, a high level understanding.
Yes, pretty much all were impacted, but some are impacted more than others. And that's dependent on, for example, the barrier was the biggest impact. We shut it down completely.
Okay.
And then there's the different aspects. For example, the Chevron nitrification treatment plant. We had to shut that down. Not necessarily, we shut down the delivery to Chevron because we had to take that water and put it back into our influent line to mix up the water that's coming into us to reduce the amount of turbidity.
Okay.
So they were, in that sense, Chevron nitrified was impacted more than some of the other ones.
Okay.
So to answer your question, yeah, it does vary from one customer to another.
Okay. And then when you say shut down the barrier completely, but I guess you mean you shut down the recycled water to the barrier.
Correct.
Obviously, we were putting potable into the barrier,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think one last thing, and you mentioned it, but the utilities you said went up significantly, that 400-something% right here on August. But that a lot of that was because we're using potable water instead of our own system. Does that, so somehow that affects our electricity use when we do that? Or how does that work?
Just the cost of water, whether that be from the city of El Segundo, whether that be from the water that we get from Met through the county system into ECL, or whether that be the water that we got from Cal Water at our JMM facility. Those bills, those water bills come into us, and that's what's reflected in these.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so that comes under utilities. Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, again, I know that we're still getting more information, but this is, glaringly clear how this has impacted us and how it's impacted our finances and how we're, still paying bills as we go. And the previous report with the equipment being so stressed. I think one thing that down the road, when we get the larger report, just I think for myself, I'd love to see is how the imported water purchases went up. If you have a table, a chart, whatever, just to show, because obviously we must have bought a lot more imported water to deal with this scenario that we couldn't produce our recycling. So I think visually it'd be nice to see that when you come together with the next report. But I think this is really good and clear for now. Thank you to my colleagues who've asked for this. It's really important for us to understand as well as our public to understand. So thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Director Houston. Just following up, but Director Houston did make a lot of points that I think were very valid and I was going to address. But a couple of additional comments / questions. One, how many more months do you think before you'll be able to wrap this up? But looks like things are getting back to normal. If we look at just the trend data that was presented, Susanna indicated that getting there. So are we impacted for another month, another 2 months? I know you're looking forward, but what is your guesstimate?
Well, I think we're going to get the September numbers in pretty soon here, and we'll be able to develop more of a dollar value versus dollar per acre foot value. And hopefully, we're hoping to come back to the next ENO committee and be able to present that. That's our goal right now. We're in October, and as Susanna mentioned, it's gone down, but it's not stable. So even then, it might not be a final dollar value. It might take us months to get it to a final one. But we're hoping to come back to the E&O committee next month with some dollar value.
Okay. And I do want to highlight, and Director Houston did say this, but we should be very specific on how much more additional imported water was required as a result of the inability to produce at the Ed C. Little plant because of the upset at Hyperion. And ultimately, and Mark, as you mentioned, that you're going to come back with a dollar number because we need to basically convert all of this information to a final number. But I'd be very interested in seeing how we do that, because right now you got most of your costs on an acre-foot basis, and how that's going to get transformed to a final dollar. Okay, so when you guys come
Absolutely.
back, those are some of the things we're looking forward to, but thank you very much for all of the information.
Absolutely. And I will say this, in terms of the imported water, I would venture to estimate that 2,200 acre feet that you see down there at this in this slide, most of that is imported water because El Segundo is reliant on imported water 100%. And the water that we get through the county's system back into ECL is imported water. So the only water that's not, maybe not necessarily, it's a mix of imported slash groundwater, could be the one that we're getting from Cal Water. So I would say that the majority of the 2,200 acre feet that you can see there for those 2 months is imported. But what we'll do is come back and graphically show the estimate and the figures for the whole 3 months.
Okay. All right, if then we can go ahead and move on with the rest of the presentation.
I will turn it over to Uzi, Operations Manager, for the rest of the presentation.
Great, thank you, Barkev. Yeah, those are always staggering numbers, and I think we've worked so much on the Hyperion issue. Just a quick slide and some pictures to show that we're still doing regular work. The operators are out there. I saw today they're quite busy getting to things that would normally be a part of a monthly maintenance. So always nice to see these photos of you know, how much activity is going on at the plant. Next slide, please. This slide is where I mentioned earlier, I did want to talk about supply chain issues, and also, you know, this event, and not just us, it affects, I know the city of LA, Hyperion, it affects a lot of people, but this event, if you think about, took place during a drought year in a warmer summer months. You know, imagine if this had happened in winter and there was less demand. It happened during COVID with supply chain issues. There's a lot of factors that play into that. So, you know, it's been a challenge, but that's what operators take their certs, their tests, take it serious, and do the real work. What's really been affecting us, a lot of us have heard about this. I live actually in Long Beach. You can see all the ships stacked up. I just heard on the news last night, the average wait time now for those ships to come in and get unloaded was up to 11 days, where in the past, sometimes it would be as quick as 90 minutes till they had to get in. And a lot of that, all these things on here are affecting us. And I'd love to just touch on why, because we will see that in our budget. And we will see that in even contracts that we may need to come back, as mentioned earlier, to the board and ask for more money because we weren't anticipating force majeures, extra chemicals or sampling due to the upset, etc. But on transportation, we've heard a lot about that. Very interesting. It affects us from drivers that need to come here and haul stuff out, such as our solids. It affects chemical deliveries. Some chemical deliveries require very specialized drivers. If you can imagine, if you're carrying a very dangerous chemical, they need to have very special clearance. So it's not as easy as saying, let me grab someone who knows how to drive, as our haulers have informed us. It's also affected compliance sample deliveries. We have, as we mentioned earlier, as some of the laboratories become very niche oriented, our biosolids, we now have to send it back east. There are just not very many providers. And when they were having issues with UPS and FedEx, we couldn't get it there in time. They didn't have enough drivers to meet our compliance numbers. So all these small things have affected West Basin and many other of our partners, water agencies. Shipping costs. We have seen where we would normally, for example, order some new membranes or these clovers we mentioned, where they may come from another state. We've seen those costs be a premium, or you wait for when there's something available, which they can give you a 2 to 3 months window. So these kind of things are what are impacting us. And then one interesting thing that greatly affected and is still affecting us, believe it or not, a lot of our chemicals come on rail lines. And when they do, they come from, for example, Washington is a big production area. There was a big fire in Northern California that burned part of a bridge that was one of the main thoroughfares. They were able to get it somewhat up, but before then, they'd have to send from Washington. You have to go all the way to Salt Lake City, then come back down into California. You can imagine how long that takes. Or when they go over the bridge now, it only has one way. They have to only take a certain number of cars. So just all these things, again, these different changes going on are impacting us. That's not to say we're not getting the work done, but you can imagine the scramble, or again, why we see some of these added costs. US processing, I bring that up because a lot of people believe that maybe it's just the supplies we're waiting for in the port. But even in the US, there are a lot of our chemicals where there are fewer and fewer production facilities, or they come from one area. The perfect example is what's called Chemical Alley. That is Louisiana and Texas. That supplies the majority of chemical for water and wastewater industries for the entire West Coast. So when they had their big freeze, or when they had a hurricane, they all impacted that. And so that makes us vulnerable to that. In addition, they're also having labor shortages, where we hear things such as there's microchip shortages. I heard glass is now a hot commodity. These things also affect our vendors who may be producing some type of supply in addition to the raw material. One other thing, and why we like to have these double contracts, is when we noticed we were having chemical supplies, we have an advantage of having an operator, Suez, who is multinational. So they have a lot of access that maybe we don't have, or as a public agency. Even then, a lot of the vendors were not taking new customers. This could even impact some of our bidding. Some of them right now, because a lot of chemicals, for example, are a commodity, they have told us, they have told me directly, if they had to bid today, they may not. So that's something for us to keep informed about. So we know maybe there is an advantage to extending a contract briefly. We need to keep our finger on the pulse of that, because it really is affecting that vendor reluctance. That's why, again, it'll be nice if we go into multi-contracts where we sort of have that ability. If they only take care of existing customers, we then would be existing customers. Some of the solutions, not to sound so grim, believe it or not, the EPA is heavily involved in this. They recognize that drinking water and wastewater is quite important. Now, recycled water is something that we at AWWA and Water Reuse are making a pitch for, because drinking water and wastewater are prioritized, because they often see recycled water as, you know, something that goes on people's lawn or a park. Well, what we recognize now is if you don't have that recycled water, you actually utilize more potable water, as we see. So there is no net gain for the chemicals, and therefore that is something that the state and even the feds are working on right now, which is good to see. And this is great when we have a lot of staff folks out there. I would say that members of the board out in these associations, there's a lot of working groups forming now who are trying to get ahead of this and make sure that water all water types, drinking water, wastewater, and recycled water, are put on a priority list when we're looking at things, when we see these global supply chains and how we secure them for our country. With that, then next slide, please. When we go back to some of our regular slides here, again, this is our monthly activity. I always like to keep us updated when things change. You can see the extra samples as we talked about. Again, those are the things we put in contracts. We try to anticipate a little extra, but maybe not for this duration. So those kind of things we'll bring back to the board as we need, so that they are fully, so it's very clean, so the public can see that. And is disclosed on all the additional work we're doing and additional funds we may need. Next slide, please. This also is one of our regular monthly slides, often not a lot of change on here, but very good for our customers to know. We are working on a lot of those programs. Some of these for the board, they may come to the board later if there are agreements, often pass-through agreements. We like to give you a little heads up and make sure there's an opportunity if there are any questions, and to be aware of our purveyor program that provides a nice service for the cities that we serve. And with that, next slide, I believe I'd like to introduce Jeremiah, who's filling in for Frank this week to finish us off with our distribution system.
Awesome. Thank you, Uzi, and good evening, directors and members of the committee. Yeah, I'm happy to share the September 2021 update for our recycled water distribution system activities. The district's contract distribution system operator, Inframark, did respond to one leak incident that was reported last month. This was an air vacuum valve located on Aviation Boulevard. That was a victim of a hit and run incident, as you can see from the photos on the bottom left of this slide. So Inframark did respond and shut off the water leaking and did perform a repair on that valve. And so that was the same air vac repair that you see in the total in our chart on the slide. Inframark also continued their normal routine work of exercising distribution system valves to ensure they're in working order when we need them. And as we've been talking about a lot today, the distribution crew was out there performing additional water quality samples, gathering those samples from the distribution system on a more daily basis than we normally do, and also responding to customer service issues by, we're doing a lot of spot chlorinating out in the distribution system to support increased recycled water quality for a lot of areas in the far reaches of our distribution system. So some photos of some of the valves they exercise and some blow-off valves that were cleaned out last month by the distribution crew are shown on the bottom there. Next slide, please. And then switching gears a little bit, looking at our recycled water customer development programs. This slide does have some photos of a new recycled water site that's getting ready for connection to our distribution system. This is the Torrance Technology Center, what we're calling the phase 2 development over there. And this is the former Toyota site in the city of Torrance. Our staff's been working with the health department to review the plans and perform construction inspections. We skipped ahead a little bit soon. If we can go back one slide, please. Thank you. Yeah. So these photos just show new recycled water pipelines on the site and then new potable lines that the health department needs to inspect before the site is approved for connection. So we do anticipate the new Torrance Tech Center will use about 12 acre-feet of recycled water a year for irrigation, and it should be completed by December this year. Next slide, please. In addition to new recycled water site connections, our staff does work with existing recycled water sites that are undergoing modifications. And so this slide does show the what was the former The Lakes golf course in El Segundo. As some of the board may be aware, this site was taken over recently and is being redeveloped by Topgolf. So they are keeping the golf course, but it did involve a total overhaul of the irrigation system at the golf course with a new meter for the site. And so actually this morning at around 10 a.m., we did do the final turn on of recycled water for the golf course site. So that's one of our largest irrigation customers. So we're happy to see them back on recycled water starting today. Next slide, please. And kind of looking forward for the board, we did want to put this on the board's radar. Some of you may be aware that there's a lot of construction activity going on in Inglewood lately. This This slide specifically is referring to the new Clippers Stadium planned for development. The project's called the Inglewood Basketball and Entertainment Center. It's located directly across the street from the SoFi Stadium project, so it will definitely be a very popular area for both stadiums to be at. The developer did approach our staff a few months ago with a request to construct a new recycled water meter service to serve the site's irrigation as well as some industrial uses with recycled water. And so our staff is working with the developer and with West Basin's legal counsel to develop an agreement which would allow the developer to actually construct the meter service for the district, with the district's engineering staff performing design review and also construction inspection services during the construction of these meters. So we are working on an agreement right now, and we did just want to preview the board a little bit that we will be bringing this agreement for your review and approval next month in November. And so we're hoping that, yeah, this will be another very high profile recycled water use site in the city of Inglewood. So just wanted to put that on the board's radar. And I believe that's the end of our presentation, but I am happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Mr. Chair, this is Director Gray. May I ask a question?
Director Gray, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the presentation. And perhaps you already said this, but what's the potential recycled water amount?
You know, we're still waiting to receive the on-site recycled water design plans for the stadium, and so that will give us a little bit more information about how much water the site would use. So I don't have that number right now, but as soon as we do have the anticipated demands, we can bring it back to the board for your information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
If I may, this is Barkev. On that last slide, it's worth noting that one of the discussions that we're having with the developer of the site is about the potential location for a disinfection facility. In past years, we had plans to put in a disinfection facility in the city of Inglewood's yard, and that site, we prepared design plans to put in a disinfection facility. And the reason for a disinfection facility in that area is mainly because of the 36-inch line that runs through Prairie Avenue, and what that does to downstream customers in winter months when the demands are low and velocity is very low going through that 36-inch pipe. It causes some water quality issues. And so over the years, we've known that we probably need to construct a disinfection facility in the Inglewood area. And so when the site no longer became available with the city, we've continued to look for other sites that could be a possible good location. And we've approached this subject with the developers, and we hope to continue that discussion with the developers as well as with the city in the months ahead.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, real quick, Mr. Chair. I want to say thank you for the updates and these wonderful graphics, you guys. But I want to go back just to in the report real quick. Let me find the page number of the report. I think it was page 48, which is the little table of some of the other projects. And two of them that are noted here are El Segundo Middle School and Center Street Elementary School, something about some recycled water site modifications. So can you just tell me what those are, Jeremiah?
Sure thing, Director Houston. Yeah, those are very recently, our staff was contacted by the school district. These are existing recycled water sites that use recycled water for irrigation. And so they have projects going on at El Segundo Unified to install or construct new gymnasiums at a bunch of schools. And so the Center Street School and the El Segundo Middle School are moving forward with construction. And when they build these new gyms, they actually have to modify the locations of the existing water and recycled water lines on the project site. And so anytime a recycled water site modifies any of their water piping, the health department does need to approve those changes. And so West Basin provides support to those sites by reviewing the plans, providing design support, and then we also get the health department involved for the construction inspection. So just because they are recycled water sites, the health department wants to be there and make sure that the proper lines are being tapped or deleted in the right way. And so that's why we notify the board of these sites. So they should be starting construction in the next 2 or 3 months at those El Segundo school sites.
Okay, great. You're right. I remember hearing about I think the Center Street. Well, yeah, they're both there in the same area, middle school. So I've heard about that gym a lot. So that's good. And then one other question, and that was on page 50. We have that map of different things, or maybe it was one after that. But there's a lot of work that's going on at Raytheon, at the Raytheon site in El Segundo. So can you just give me an idea what the timeline is on the completion of that project?
That's correct. So we actually are working already on 2 sites that are on the Raytheon, or what was the current Raytheon property. I believe we called those the Nash Street Exchange and the Nash Street Exchange Parkways. I think those are included on our monthly list. And so those are the properties that front right along El Segundo Boulevard. So essentially Raytheon is parceling up their property, and there's going to be a new road constructed. Starting from where our treatment plant is, Hughes Way is going to be extended up and around the Raytheon property and become a public road, and there's going to be new developments on that road. So we have been approached by the city of El Segundo and the project developer, and they're just starting to determine what each site is going to be, whether that be open space, industrial, warehouses. So they haven't quite provided what the irrigation demands might be for that area, but we are working with the engineering department here at West Basin and the developer to, I think they're going to propose to extend our recycled water line off of Hughes Way to reach some of those new sites. So we don't know the demands yet, and so that's why we don't show them on the map yet, but I believe in the next month or 2, we should have a better idea of how much water they intend to use from the recycled connections, and then you'll see those sites show up in the future.
Okay, good, excellent. And just on that, I know obviously, you live in El Segundo, I think, but for those of us who live here, there's all the construction on El Segundo Boulevard. So that seems to be moving quite quickly. I assume it'll be done sometime in first part of next year, 2022, give or take. But let's make sure we think about how, when that is accomplished, we can partner with city and the developer to announce that. So just already get you guys thinking about that. It's a big project, it's torn up the street. The residents over here, it's been a big hassle, if you will, like it always is. But there looks like there's going to be some really nice facilities there. So I'd love to partner on that when we get that chance, okay?
Absolutely.
Great, right. Thank you, Jeremiah. And thank you staff and Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. If there are no other comments, then we can move on to the next item.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Alvarez. The last item that we have on our information calendar is item 6D, which begins on packet page 73, and that is the Capital Improvement Program update. Today we have Wendell Johnson, our Manager of Engineering, for the presentation. However, we do have our Executive Manager, Barka Masulian, here for the introduction of that item.
Thank you, EJ. I wanted to take the opportunity to update the committee about a couple of items that are coming up in meetings in the next couple of months. One, back in July, we provided an overview of the solids handling improvement project to the E&O committee, and there was some good discussion about the drivers for the project and some good comments. And the committee asked us to work on a scope of services and bring it back for the committee to review. And we did that in September. We brought back a draft scope of services and again had a really good discussion and some comments from the committee members. So I just want to update the committee that we plan on bringing that one back in November with potentially a revised scope of work for the committee's consideration. Also, with regards to our recent master planning efforts, you may recall that back in March of this year, we and our consultants provided an overview of the master plan. We talked about all sorts of things, the capital improvement program, the different options at that time. And the board asked us to come back and talk a little bit, have a more focused discussion on key elements of the master plan. And we did that in April. We came back and talked a little bit about the some elements of the master plan, and we talked about the existing treatment facilities, the flows, the capacities. We also prepared a presentation again in July, although we didn't get a chance to conduct that presentation. The meeting went along. But what we're hoping to do is to bring back another key element, and that is the Hyperion pump station to the board meeting on October 25th. And what we hope to discuss is, again, provide a historical overview of the facility, talk about the capacity, the pumping capacity, not only for the pump station itself, but the force main, and then talk about the implication of that capacity, both in current capacity and future capacity. What does that mean for West Basin? What are the options that are out there? So we're looking forward to providing that presentation to the full board on October 25th. With that, I will turn it over to Wendell to talk about some of the other CIP projects.
Thank you, Barkev. If members of the committee could please turn to page 84 in your packet. I'm here this afternoon to give you a brief update of the capital improvement project. I'm going to touch on 4 major projects: the Donald L. Deere headquarters building, JMM CRWP Phase 2 expansion, the decommissioning of the Brewer desalter, and update on the Hyperion secondary effluent pump station. Next page, please. As you may recall, we made a presentation early this summer about the DLD building, and we had and the board directed us to come back with several different options. And one of the tasks that was assigned to us was to take a look at an appraisal or the value of the building. In September, we issued a RFP, and we only had one respondent, which was Nagasaki Associates in Torrance. We went back to the respondent, and we asked them to reduce some of the services that were provided in the RFP. They provided 12 different tasks, and they had 2 additional approaches. And the 2 additional approaches that they added to it was to take a look at the market value of the property as land only, and also take a look at analysis or validation of the property if the proposed renovation and restoration work was completed. And so we were able to meet with them and discuss removing these items, and it brought the proposal down from $10,500 down to $5,500. In addition, staff did some due diligence, and we made some calls around, or more or less a windshield survey with various appraisal organizations in the South Bay area, and asked them how much would appraisal would cost. Okay, and what we came up with, it was between $3,000 and $11,500. The $11,500 proposal was with the addition of the additional scope of work, which in this case was, taking a look at the value of the land, as well as taking a look at the building with the proposed improvements done to that. And so we're ready to move ahead with onboarding the respondent to the RFP for about $5,500 worth of services in that particular case. Additionally, we looked at, as you know, we have some aging systems within the building, and one system that we're concerned about is the HVAC system, and we're looking at a replacement. But unfortunately, without knowing what what we plan to do with the building, it's not worth the large investment into the system until we can do something with the building. But however, the IT room cooling system needs to be addressed. And so working with Nelson, he spearheaded the project. We went out and we looked at providing just a split system for that room, and we got some informal quotes between about 18,000 and 20,000. Essentially, the unit itself was somewhere between $16,000 and $18,000 from what we were getting back. In addition to that, we have a roof system that has a 25-year guarantee, and we have to bring that roof contractor to make any penetrations into the roof in order to not void the warranty. Okay, and so we're ready to move forward with providing the necessary cooling for the IT room. I'd like to tap into EJ for a second. I believe today he had some kind of contact with Southern California Edison.
Wendell, thank you very much. And I wanted to bring this to the committee's attention because we talk regularly about the building, the current state of it, and potential needs. And I did want to highlight for the committee and board that we were contacted by Southern California Gas Company today related to a detection of abnormal amount of methane gas. And I was a little bit surprised to learn this, but I'm pleased to know it, that SoCal Gas actually utilizes drone technology to detect such things. Methane gas was detected from our boiler exhaust above us on the ceiling here at the DLD building. Due to the location of the boiler being on the roof and the fact that we were venting directly to the atmosphere without going through occupied areas, we'll be allowed to continue to utilize and operate the boiler, which is good news. However, they will be dispatching a technician to the DLD building in the coming days to provide some recommendations. Obviously, with the age of the boiler system that we have here at the building, there is some concern. And of course, we've discussed the potential need to replace that, obviously with new technologies and looking at potential high efficiency boilers. These issues no longer exist with the newer technologies. So we would expect that probably to come back as a recommendation. But I did want to bring that to you because that does play into these discussions as we've talked about the ceiling here and of course the renovations that potentially will be needed. So I thought it was relevant. So I want to bring that to your attention. And I also want to say thank you to our admin team bringing this forward, and actually Nelson Rodriguez, our facilities maintenance coordinator, for spearheading this and really their quick reaction today. So I'll throw that back over to you, Wendell.
Okay, and just to update that, one of the tasks that was brought up at the presentation on the overview of the DLD building was how much space is required for the agency. And we were able to look through several years of reports and start to consolidate the reports. And what we're going to be doing over the next month is we're going to be interviewing the individual departments to kind of verify what type of recommendation we need for actual space for each one of the departments. And we hope to be coming back in November or December with what is the square footage that we actually need. And at the same time, we're looking for some guidance from the industry out there with the changing or the results of the pandemic and the hybrid workspace. We would also like to see, how does that affect the amount of space that the agency actually needs. So next slide, please. So we launched a partnership workshop for the construction of Carson Phase 2 expansion. And this workshop is essentially a communication exercise. This project is a $21 million project. It has about 400 days of construction or more that the project will be constructed. And so as a team, we want to start off on a good footing with the project. And so we were able to develop some common goals as a team, and this is what the slide is displaying here, where we're looking for, we looked in the areas of schedule, operations, safety, and budget on some milestones that we would like to be able to achieve. Next slide, please. One of the, next slide, please. Okay, and additional goals for the that we came up with: labor compliance, quality control, no reworking, and teamwork and environmental. It is a kind of a strategic plan with the agency that we like to try to provide local opportunities in the construction projects that we're working with. And so this is a main group of focus where we're trying to get tier 1 employment. And this essentially means anyone that lives within our service area, okay? And also try to engage about a 5% at-risk worker. And the at-risk worker is someone that has a gross income is about 50% less than the median income in Los Angeles County. In this particular case, it would be income below 40,000. The median income in Los Angeles County in 2021 is about 80,000. Or they could be homeless, they could be a welfare or a public assistant individual, they could have a history of involvement with the penalty system, unemployed, or a single parent. And then in order to qualify for this type of program, they have to have 2 of the conditions that are listed in that in the at-risk category. Next slide, please. We started operations engineering. We had some activities in the decommissioning of the Brewer desalter. This slide kind of outlines the activity that we had over the last month. We engineering and operations, we met at the site and we conducted initial recons on September 28th. Operational staff started contacting colleges and universities to see if any of the equipment from the decommissioning could be utilized as part of a research. Later that same week or the next week, we met with Water Replenishment District and California Water, Cal Water, representatives, and they toured the site initially to take a look at the assets that are out there. One of our chief goals in looking into the universities as well as contacting Water Replenishment District and California Water is that we would like to make this decommissioning as simple, cost-effective, and as quickly as possible. And so the least that we have to demo, or if the asset can find a new home, the less cost is going to be involved in that. California Water expressed some interest in keeping the building, and then we met again with WRD to determine what needed to be removed. And this meeting was kind of a brainstorming meeting, and later we're going to sit down and pretty much formulate what is going to be removed on the site. Right now, it was kind of like a visit where everyone was talking out loud on or thinking out loud on what they felt that they wanted to keep and what they felt they could utilize. And they didn't really have an exact plan for what the site was going to be used for in the future. And so they're onboarding consultants to determine that. And so we will continue with open discussions with WRD on the decommissioning. Next slide, please. but there are some activities that we can get into, and some of it is we're going to develop a timeline or schedule, and we're going to address some of the low-hanging fruit that's out there, things that are easy to take care of, like neutralizing and removing existing chemicals, removing supplies, spare parts, and furniture, removing temporary and above ground piping, identifying easily salvageable equipment, identifying the specialty demolition and some of the components that are part of the specialty demolition are the decarbonators, sulfuric acid tank, the reverse osmosis equipment, and taking a look at the VFDs as well as the mechanical equipment that remains on the site and seeing if any of it can be used for spare parts or if any of the equipment could be salvaged throughout the industry. Additionally, we're taking a look at operations, taking a look at the permit, and finally we'll be identifying what will be demolished and how it will be demolished. Next slide, please. Okay, good news on Hyperion Secondary Effluent Pump Station, pumps 5, 6, and 7. And just to touch on some impact out there because of the upset at Hyperion, when we went in there to remove and replace the pumps that we've had warranty discussions about in previous meetings, we ended up having to pump out about 2 to 3 feet of solids. So I just wanted to mention that so that you can see that really this upset at Hyperion has almost affected every inch of our operations at our various plants. Okay, and so this is a timeline of activity that has taken place in the last month. We had pump number 5 pull, and it was taken back to the shop for resealing it and examination and cleaning. Pumps in 5 and 7 were reinstalled September 28th through the 29th. The couplings were replaced, the shafts were replaced with different material, different type of stainless steel, and currently we've got both pump 5 and 7 online this week, and they are safely operating and efficiently. Next slide, please. We're looking at when we can take out pump number 6, okay, and we're hoping for the week of the 18th, and we expect the testing of the pump or the reinstalling of the pump of the week of the 25th, and fully testing the smart system by the end of November or early November, and that would assure that the system is completely back online and operating to its full capacity. Next slide, please. If anyone has any questions, I'm willing to ask them, answer them.
Okay, Director Williams, do you have any questions or comments? I think he's still on mute.
No, thank you.
Okay, any of the other directors have any comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, I don't have any further comments, and I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Any general, no closed session, so pretty much the end of the agenda. Any comments from the director for future agenda items?
Mr. Chair, real fast, this is Director Houston. I think this is more for a little bit longer term planning, but something to at least opine to staff. Obviously the Hyperion situation has greatly impacted us. It's an unforeseen type of event. And then of course, as we keep seeing what are happening around the region and the state, all kinds of issues that if it's climate change and other things that are just impacting public agencies, especially on the financials. I really think that that's something in our budget talks and conversations that maybe we should start anticipating and look at, do we have a fund or money set aside for unanticipated expenses or greater than anticipated expenses, because again, as you see what's happening in other areas, there's just infrastructure can't take some of the things that are happening. And so I think that what we just saw happen to us here, it's out of our control to a degree. And so these were things we should just start having a dialogue about. So I think, EJ, that should be something that should just be on the radar screen of staff, as well as our board, as we continue, moving forward with, our planning and, all these discussions we're starting to really have about the future of the agency. But these things are really things I think that we just need to make sure we're a little more prepared for. And so that the board members and the public will understand too. So anyway, that's just a comment. I really think these were great presentations today. I want to thank staff and my colleagues too for some excellent questions. All right. So thanks so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, with that, there's no other comments. We are adjourned.